Muted, but I think, I don't know, is it working? All right. We'll do it. All right. I think in order for us to be this chatty, we must have like all of our early morning people here today, because there's nobody that seems to be like half asleep except maybe me. Everybody else is chatting, and that's a wonderful thing. But we do have a lot of chapters to try to get through this morning. We're going to be starting in Genesis 39. Genesis 39 is where we are today. And I want to give a reminder that we do have the prayer room is available. If anybody wants to avail themselves of that opportunity, it's just up the stairs. It's a good thing to do. We're gonna go through this. These are pretty familiar stories, I think. We were going to talk about Joseph. We're going to kind of get into the meat of his story here. We got the whole Potiphar's wife scandal. Sizzling and exciting, as always. We've got mysterious dreams, predictions. We've got incarcerations. We've got all kinds of things to look forward to today. But I wanted to start with a question. Really two. The first question is, how do you know if the Lord is with you or with someone? Read these scriptures. It's like, it says over and over, the Lord is with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. How do we know, how do I know personally, if the Lord is with me or is with somebody else? What do we look for?
Success.
Success? Yeah?
The way they conduct themselves.
The way they conduct themselves. Sort of a fruits of the Spirit kind of thing? Yeah? Successful, fruits of the Spirit. Anything else? How peaceful you are. Keeps breathing. Keeps you, just the fact that you're alive. Ernie suggests, I think, if I could put words in there, that the fact that you're alive means the Lord is with you. Okay. Yeah.
Not always do we know or do they know that God is with them at that time.
Yeah.
I'm just looking back, and I think some of the Old Testament stories we see, looking back, God was with them, God was in this, not to curse them in this.
The hindsight, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can look and say, God might have spared me from this thing, or whatever. God was actually doing me a favor in this. I think about Joseph's story, and you look at the beginning of it. You know, he gets sold into slavery. He's bought, and then you see, it says the Lord is with him, and he's got all these things. Everything he touches turns to gold, right? He gets he's prosperous. He's successful. He's all these things. And if you ask Joseph at that point, or if you look at Joseph's life and say, how do I know God's with you? Well, you're successful. You're prosperous. Fast forward a little bit, and he's in jail. Now I'll go in and I ask Joseph and say, what's going on? And be like, well, you're in jail. The Lord's not with you, obviously. You know, and so a lot of it is kind of hard. I think all of the things that we mentioned here are true, and it can be kind of hard sometimes, for me at least, to say for sure that I'm on the right course. We look for things on the outside, and I think maybe this will give us some clues. So the second question I wanted to ask was, what, if any, significance do you give to your dreams? I'm not talking about your dreams as in I dream of going to Disneyland kind of thing. I talk about the dreams that you have when you're sawing logs. What does anybody give any significance to those dreams? How do you know which dreams are significant? Any thoughts about that? Do we think about them? Does anybody even remember their dreams? Barely. Becky does. She's got vivid dreams. I bet you're a vivid dreamer. They're weird. Probably. Weird isn't like Book of Revelation weird, or like
No, just off the,
just
off of what they're just weird.
just. Fair enough. That's the next small talk conversation with Becky.
I've been told that there are a few people that remember a lot of their dreams.
Yeah.
I think most people remember little or none of their dreams.
Yeah.
I remember parts of my dreams every single night. And it's something, and usually I can connect it to something that's going on,
Yeah.
work-wise, family-wise, church-wise, whatever, but then the oddities of it, I'd rather not get into.
No.
Psychedelic at times.
Yeah. Dreams can be very personal, can't they? And they can be unnerving, and they can leave you kind of in a weird state. Angie sometimes gets mad at me in her dreams, and she remains mad the rest of the day. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I've done some awful things to her in dreams, and I've paid a bitter price for them. I think dreams are interesting to me. I've had a couple that I felt were deeply significant, but most of the time I can relate them. And I feel like sometimes we have dreams that tell us more about what's going on in our stress or things like that. But dreams are going to play an important role, and it played a huge role in the ancient world for figuring out what wisdom was, for what you should do, what the gods wanted. But let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. We're looking at chapter 39. We see in verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph. So he's been sold into slavery. You think this is a time when the Lord has kind of abandoned him. I wonder if Joseph felt that way. He's in the bottom of a cistern, right? His brothers have openly discussed his murder. He barely is survived. He barely is allowed to survive to the next thing, and it's being sold into slavery, which is not good. And so you wonder if Joseph felt like the Lord was with him at this point, but he was there, and he becomes a very successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. All right, so look what he does. Sometimes it's hard to make good HR picks. I don't know if you have ever been in a situation where you have to hire people or do evaluations, but Joseph is your man here. Look at this. His master saw, the Lord was with him, and because all that he did was prosperous in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight. You got to love this guy. Everything he does turns to gold. So he makes him overseer and puts him in charge of all that he had. All right. So it's going well for him, and God's favor is on him. And because God's favor is on him, look at this in verse 5. It says, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and in field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and with him there had no concern for anything but the food that he ate. He is living his best life, isn't he? Potiphar is living the good life. He's got a guy who's taking all of the load. He's like making it all happen, and his biggest worry is like what's going to be for mealtime, and I bet he didn't worry about that much. He's got it going really well. Potiphar is a happy man. Okay? But, as some of us know, it is a struggle being so good looking. Ain't that the truth? It's the truth. Ernie will tell you, it's a struggle. All right? Joseph was handsome and good looking. So he's competent. He's good looking. He walks like an Egyptian probably at this point. He's got it all going on. Right? And so this is going to catch, he's going to catch the eye of Potiphar's wife. Now I want to stop here and ask, so Potiphar's wife, we don't know a whole lot about her motivation or anything like that, but she was a person and she probably had some motivations. So let me ask this question. What kinds of things in your experience, not your personal experience necessarily, but in your lived experience, cause people to have affairs? That's what she's after. She's after an affair, right? What kinds of things lead people to that?
Just one historical note. If you work for the king, you're generally a eunuch. And Potiphar would still have had a wife, even though he was a eunuch. Would put her in a position of
Well,
than what we would normally see.
That took a whole turn I did not expect, Greg. You're probably right, even if you are the captain of the guard. You wouldn't expect that from the captain of the guard. But it could very well be the case. And that would add a thing. So maybe some loneliness. Lust. Could be. Get back to Greg's point. Attention. I wonder about this. Potiphar's probably, I know he's mostly concerned about what he's eating, but probably a busy man. Maybe sometimes gives himself all to the job. That's not the kind of job when you're working for the Pharaoh that you could just clock out, go back to the house and binge some Netflix. This is like all the time kind of thing. So maybe that. I don't know. I just want to give Potiphar's wife a human side, because it's easy just to take her and make her a sort of a flat character, she's awful. But she probably had some kind of reasons. She's obviously a despicable person in a lot of ways, so she does this despicable thing here. We put that to the case there. We don't know what her big thing is, but we know that she's wanting to lie with Joseph. And then he's going to refuse her. He refuses her in a kind of interesting way, I think. He says, look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in this house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God? We don't know how often Joseph and Potiphar's wife spoke. They may have had some kind of cordial relationship. We don't know. He's in the house a lot. She's in the house a lot. They're working around. Maybe. This is the kind of response, though, that I think is interesting, because it kind of gets, in my mind, to the dual nature of what happens when we sin. He wants to, this sin of adultery would be a profound betrayal of Potiphar, wouldn't it? It's the relationals, how we treat each other. It's a wicked thing to treat another person with whom you have respect and relationship in such a profound way. And I think that's part of what makes this a sin against God. He's laying out the reasons right here. To treat another person this way is a sin against God. Anybody have anything they want to add to his rebuff here?
It shows you Joseph's character. The reason he was so successful, he's honest, he's moral, he's got all these qualities, and he fears God, and he doesn't want to do anything that would disturb that relationship between him.
Yeah, he's got a lot to lose.
Makes him a great man.
He's got a lot to lose. Certainly. Anything else about his rebuff here? Would that do it? Would that do it? With that explanation of, I can't do this to your husband. If she's not really happy with her husband right now, which maybe she was, I don't know. Maybe she was just, I don't know. Maybe she was just an animal. Could be. But probably not. So he's in a tough situation, isn't he? Now he's in the situation now where the cat is out of the bag. The Potiphar's wife has made the advance. He said no, and now it's going to be awkward, isn't it? It's going to be awkward. What would you do in this situation? If you were Joseph, how would you do this? What options do you have on the table? Saturate her with your absence. A noticeable absence. Kind of hard. You're all in the same house. Even if it's a pretty big house. It's kind of hard.
Talk to the Lord about it.
Pray about it. Yeah. Absolutely. He can't really quit. Like, it's not a job that you can quit.
Yeah,
You know?
he can't go to HR and complain.
He can't. He can't say this is harassment.
I had wondered, though, what would have happened or not happened had he gone to Potiphar?
Yeah.
This is pure speculation that Potiphar probably would have just rolled his eyes and said, yeah, she's that way. I'm just...
Could be. Maybe this isn't her first rodeo. It could be.
I think it's pretty certain this was not her first adventure.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know what ancient Egyptian sexual ethics were. I'm pretty positive there's a double standard. I'm pretty positive that she would not be able to do what Potiphar could. I'm certain of that. But we don't know. We don't really know what the deal is. But I'm sure, as we see when Potiphar's reaction comes along, we can see that it was not a kosher thing to do.
As long as even if she was that bad, and he probably knew it, you know, she does her thing, he does his thing, but when it's brought to his attention, that's like you have to do something about him.
Yeah. You fast forward, a couple thousand years, and you've got the emperors, right? And there's some just absolutely amazing scandals with emperors' wives. And it rolls along for a while, and everybody in Rome knows it until it's just unavoidable, and then bad things happen to that person because you can't get around it. Like the scandal is what you're worried about. I don't know. I think he's in a situation. He's still continuing to work in the house. He's got no option, and she loses her cool, and so she tries to grab his garment. Right? She grabs it, and he flees and runs outside. He doesn't have really any other option, does he? And then, sometimes I think when we are in situations like that, we absolutely just have to physically remove ourselves from the situation. And it's helpful that he wasn't interested in the liaison, right? He's already said no. His mind is made up about that. Doesn't seem to be any going. He sees it as a great sin against Potiphar, a great sin against God. He's not on the fence. It'd be a different story if he's on the fence. It might be a little harder, but he's ready to. He's actually willing to flee. Yeah. So she's going to make up a story at this point. I don't know if she's just enraged. I guess she's enraged that she continually gets thwarted. Maybe it's in a situation now where she can't hide it anymore, and she's in self-defense mode. If you've made a mistake, a lot of times what you want to do is throw somebody else under the bus, right? So you can come out okay. Self-preservation. But she is going to she's going to go and she's going to say, "See my husband." She's going to tell Potiphar, "No, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us." She's going to be ethnic about it. She said, "You can't trust those Hebrews. It's them that's doing it." Yes, sir.
It specifically mentioned that she picked a time when no other servants were in the house when she tried to grab him.
Yeah. It was planned. She's not an angel, that's for sure. She's a pretty wicked lady.
Which means this wasn't self-defense, except maybe in case of self-defense for her ego.
Self-defense for her ego, entirely possible. I could see where she's made this physical attack now, which what we would call it. This is an assault. It's what we would use in our language. And so it didn't work, and now he might feel obligated to go and talk about it at this point. I don't know. Charles?
She's probably very used to getting her own way.
Probably used to getting her.
Because she's told no.
Yeah.
She turns vengeful.
Entirely possible. She's been told no a lot of times, apparently, by Joseph. This Hebrew, this upstart. Okay, so she tells lies and a slander. All right? Is her story plausible?
She has evidence.
She has some evidence. Is it a plausible accusation? Do men do these kinds of things? 110%. Yes. Very plausible. Have you ever been falsely accused of something? Has evidence stacked against you in some way? Like, here's the garment. This is what happened. And you're kind of, Joseph doesn't have a lot of things going for his argument, does he? And it's really especially stinky because he's been doing the right thing. He's trying to do the right thing by both Potiphar, and he's trying to do the right thing by the wife, by God, and he's still getting caught up with the lies and the slander, and it's going to stick.
A couple of things about this is he is not killed on the spot, which should have happened had Potiphar believed her.
Yes.
The fact that he gets to go to the jail, which Potiphar seems to be over,
Mhm.
is point to say, I've got to do something here, Potiphar
Yes.
says. And so he probably, like you said earlier, if that's the way she is, he probably believed that about his wife more than he believed that Joseph was a liar, because Joseph's been under his care for a long time, and he's seen how Joseph is. That's a tough case to overcome for the wife.
Yes, 100%. So it says that he was enraged. Right? He became enraged, but it doesn't say at who. And the truth of it is, in this day and age, execution would have been the automatic go-to. People were not imprisoned that much in the ancient world because they don't have a lot of prisons. They don't have people dealing with it. They mostly just cut your head off and be done with it. We can see that with the poor old baker here in a little bit. Like you might be held for a while for trial, but mostly there's not like a lot of, you might get exiled perhaps, but mostly you're going to get decapitated. That's pretty much what's going to happen. And so he's not. And instead he's sent away and he's given authority again under his charge. Potiphar's still in charge. He's still the captain of the guard. And Joseph is still given authority in the place that he's going. It makes me think there is a way, a chance perhaps, that he did not believe his wife's accusations. Maybe. We don't know. Still stinks if you're Joseph. Do you think at the moment that all this drama is going down in this household, and you know how these things can go, do you think Joseph felt like God was with him at that point? Steve?
Yeah, and to your, I completely agree with where you're at. There's this, God is shaping all of this in the background. And so it's tough, as you pointed out, it's like, well, could he have done something different? Would somebody react it? Like, now all these things definitely, and for us to do that, but like very much here, God is very directly active in what's happening. Because he's taking Joseph, and eventually he's got to get him, and there's going to be a prison, and he's going to get, they can be in charge so he can save his people later on. So what we see from this is there's a story where God is being active with Joseph to save his people, and it's going to be a message for how God deals with all of mankind. Because this is the story that connects it. When we get to Mark at the end, when Mark talks about the young man who flees running away with nothing but his garment terrified, which is a signal back to this story here of the wrongful accusation, but God is in control to save his people. And so this is the connection here to Jesus being a Joseph-like figure later on, and Joseph being a Jesus-like figure. That connection is made in this story here. And God is shaping this to take care of his people. But in the meantime, like he's using all of these flawed humans to get there. But God is in control and taking care of his people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of the thing that I want to try to what was brought out to me in this study is one, like our faith is that God is in control and he's shaping this story. Even if we're in a situation where it looks like a false accusation has stuck, as if we're going through this high drama that's based on some slander and lies, and you become sort of the victim of it. And you can get in these situations where you feel like it's dark, and perhaps as dark as being in the bottom of a cistern, waiting to be sold into slavery. But at the same time, the faith is what can see that God is still in control, and it's going to play a big role. God knows about the famine coming. God knows that Joseph needs to be where he needs to be at the time. This is the strange route God chooses to put him there. And I don't know why that is, but that's the way the Lord moves. Yes, Ryan?
Back among his hometowns, the relationship between Joseph and his brothers were festering and getting worse and worse and worse. And finally just God removed Joseph from his tent to Egypt, let his brothers calm down.
Mm-hmm.
And now here in Egypt, again, in the house where he's working out, the situation is festering once again, so he's removed once again from there.
Yeah?
To to prison, which is Potiphar's workplace, which he probably put him there so his wife couldn't get his hands on her.
Yeah, it wasn't going to work for him to stay in the house. Like, that's just not a tenable situation.
But for a young man, the situation would seem incomprehensible, and by God, why is this happening? And something you only have the answers to later, decades later even, when he's had time to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. The timetable is so slow on this, Greg.
If you look at how Joseph is being trained to do what he's about to do when he gets in power. He manages a man's house perfectly, really good at it. Now he goes to jail, manages everything there, manages a lot of people there. And then he gets his reputation as one who knows how to do dreams in jail. But it's like God is preparing him for what's coming, and now he'll know how to manage the country when he gets there.
Yeah. It's pretty wild. Those are the kinds of things I think that are always so much easier to see in hindsight, and it's always so much easier to see when you have a strong faith. When you're in that moment, if you're short-sighted about things, you don't necessarily see these. So he's in jail, or something similar to it. He's confined elsewhere, and it says here the Lord made it. The Lord was with him. Because the Lord was with him, he's still there. The Lord is still there, even after all of this stuff, and it's causing whatever he did to prosper. Then we're going to switch over. He's going to meet some interesting people here. Let's think about dreams for a minute. Now, I don't know how much you know about ancient Egyptian stuff. I just learned it this week when I was studying this. They were huge on some dreams. The ancient Egyptians had books written about how to interpret dreams. And it's an interesting thing because Joseph did not have access to any of these books, but when you cross-reference them, a lot of the things that he said actually show up in those Egyptian books. Somehow there was an interesting overlap there. Have you ever read, I remember one time when I was the first girl I ever dated, she gave me what turned out to be a fairly lousy gift. It was a book about dream interpretation. I don't know why she thought that'd be something I would need or want, but it was all about how you can, and the bear represented this thing, and the goat, I'm not dreaming about bears and goats anyway, but maybe. Anyway, that industry I think is still there. I was meant to look and see if I could find anything on Amazon for sale. Probably can. Probably, yeah. So this was a big deal to them, though. This was a huge deal. This is the equivalent for us. Now, how is it that we decide? How do we know what best choice is? Well, let's say it's something about a new diet or any kind of decision we want to make in life. What was your go-to to know if this is a good idea? Huh? Your parent? You go ask your parents, okay. In my world, it's research. Research. The latest research says this, right? Oh, wow, I need to do that. The latest research in the 90s was like, don't eat eggs, you're going to die, right? Oh no, give me just egg white, please. Don't give me any of that yellow bit, right? And so we go with the latest research, and then some research comes out with like, oh, whoa, now all I can eat is eggs. You've got to be a millionaire to do it today, but that's all I can eat is eggs, you know. And so a lot of times we think back and we say, oh, those ancient people spending all their time working on dreams and deciphering dreams. We all know that's just stress or your brain firing, or maybe you don't have enough vitamins or whatever the thing is. They spend a lot of time and a lot of effort working on dreams. And we might think of that and scoff, but I want to suggest that maybe, I do think research is better. Don't misunderstand me. I think research is great. I'm all for it. But at the same time, it's not like it's sort of the silver bullet either. It can kind of change. And so we got this. So the cupbearer, he's going to meet a cupbearer and a baker. And they offended the Lord King, the king of Egypt. Not what you want to do. You don't want to offend the Pharaoh. Now, we might wonder what the offense is. Probably, given them both of these two, the Pharaoh probably got a case of food poisoning. That seems to be the suggestion that the commentators I read. Makes a lot of sense. You know, have a meal, and I'm sure they weren't using their meat thermometers the way that you should in those days. And the ovens were probably not precisely at 400 degrees. So it could be that he got some food poisoning, and somebody's got to pay for such a thing. So probably that seems pretty logical to me. And Pharaoh is angry with these two people, and so he puts them into the custody of the captain of the guard. That's Potiphar, isn't it? Still Potiphar. He's in the prison with Joseph. And this is interesting. One night, in verse 5, this is chapter 40, they both dreamed. Okay, so they both are having strange dreams on the same night. The cupbearer and the baker of king of Egypt, who were confined in prison, each his own dream. So it's not the same dream. It'd be even weirder if they had the same dream. But they each have their own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. And so Joseph, this is interesting to me, verse 6. He comes in and he saw that they were troubled. To me, this says a lot about Joseph. He's paying attention to how his other inmates feel. There's something wrong. He sees they're troubled. He's the kind of person that notices if somebody else is having a bad day or is worried about it. I think that's really telling for the kind of person that he was. And then he's going to tell them the dream. And he says, of course, do not interpretations belong to God. Please tell them to me. Have you ever tried to interpret somebody's dreams? Or do you have that friend that tells you their dreams and you don't really want to hear them? Maybe. I'll be that guy if you want. I'll tell you all my dreams. And you'll be like, oh my, what's he drinking before going to bed? So he tells them this. He gives them the examples, the interpretation, 3 branches, 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office. That's exciting. And you shall place the Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to when you were the cupbearer. All right. That's good stuff, right? But he says, but remember me. This is key. Joseph here is he's now putting some reliance on a human. We all have to do it, right? We all do this. He's counting on the cupbearer to remember him when he gets out. He's sure in the meaning of this dream. He's sure that the cupbearer is going to get out. He doesn't say if. He says, when you're out, remember me. All right? So he's going to depend on him. That's not going to work out too great. Yeah, for a bit. The chief baker said, okay, well, this isn't too bad. Maybe I don't need any trouble. Have you ever been the chief baker in this situation? And you think, okay, that worked out well for that person. Let me give it a go. That used to happen to me in the physical fitness tests. Do you remember back in the days in the 80s when Reagan making us go do all those physical fitness tests? They're like, oh, that worked well for that kid. Let me go give it a try. Not good. Not good at all. Anyway, that's beside the point. Doesn't go out so well for the baker, does he? And it's interesting. He says, 3 baskets a day, within 3 days, the Pharaoh will lift up your head, the same as the other, from you. That's the way my translation renders it. So that was a little bit cold there, Joseph. Come on. Sweeten that bitter pill. And you hang on a pole, and the birds will eat the flesh from you. Now, you got to wonder, how do you get this? If you're the baker, do you want to know? Do you want to know the meaning of this dream? Did you have to go into the details? Couldn't you have just said, you're not going to make it? I'm sorry, this is probably going to be your last few days. He just goes all the way into it. Come on, Joseph. So I always thought about this. They talk about hanging. I always thought like the hanging like I think of, the gallows. But it's not that, is it? It's a decapitation, because that's what they love to do, followed by being impaled on a pole and hung out. That's just not just not what you want for your end. It may not have even been his fault. You never know. So anyway, there's that. The Pharaoh's birthday is coming along, and he's making a big feast for his servants. Now, the birthday, Egyptians evidently didn't really celebrate birthdays in the way we do, so they're not quite sure what the birthday meant. Maybe the day that he was coronated, maybe the day he was kind of considered divine, so it might have been his reaching divine status, because the pharaohs were considered gods. And so anyway, he's making a feast for everybody. That sounds nice, doesn't it? All right, let's have a party. Let's celebrate. But what does he do at his party? He lifts up the chief cupbearer and the head of the baker among the servants. So he has, on this occasion, the baker hanged or impaled, just as Joseph had interpreted. Like, what a chill on the party, man. That takes a whole new meaning to being a wet blanket, right? Because he's having this guy killed at this big feast in honor of his birthday. Ancient world was really brutal, wasn't it? But then the cupbearer, you would think, after seeing all of these things come so true, just a few days ago, it was just a few, but he did not remember Joseph, and he forgot him. So God has been steadily with Joseph this whole time. Even when he was let down in the dumps, God was there. Even if it was sort of invisibly or silently, God was there. But the one tangible person that he can count on a few days ago fails him. There's a point, I think, in that. Yes, sir.
To be fair, given the way that everything worked out, it is probable that the Lord influenced
Could be.
the cupbearer to not remember at this time, but he'll remember later.
Could be. I think it's also in being fair to the cupbearer. Like in times when I've had, an undue amount of stress that my own personal problems are really focusing on me, and then all of a sudden those problems are resolved and I'm good. I'm just so happy and relieved. I've been so focused on my own issues that I kind of just like, whew, and you're just ready to put that chapter behind you, And I mean, it could be that too. I don't want to be too mean to the cupbearer.
Humans forgetting things is a very human thing to do.
100%. 100%. I was afraid I was going to forget to do this class this morning. Had to put it on the calendar just to make sure. It's entirely possible. Okay. Breezing along here, verse 8. In the morning, his spirit was troubled, so the Pharaoh's going to have a dream, and he calls for all the magicians. These are the wise people who do all the study in the dreams. They're probably coming in with all those books that we found later on and trying to decipher now. They're coming in, and they're going to try to figure it out, but they can't. And it's a little bit weird. It's a little bit weird that the Pharaoh is asking for help on this, because remember, the Pharaoh is considered to be divine, and he thinks of himself as divine. And so it's a little odd that he's having to ask. I think that speaks to the point of how troubled he was by these dreams. And it is, to be fair. I can't even picture what this looks like. Cows eating other cows. Corn eating another. Like, that's just some weird stuff. Maybe Becky has those kinds of. She says she has weird dreams. Maybe it's not weird for some people, but that is really weird to me. And so he's troubled. He knew it was significant. So, verse 13, cupbearer remembers Joseph. This is also a nice chance for him to get a little bit of positive points, isn't it? So he's back now. He's like, oh, I got the guy for you. Let me give you this referral. And so he's over there. So he gets called out. And he's going over. They shave him and change his clothes. You can't just go in front of the Pharaoh looking like any old guy. You gotta look the part. So he's looking like an Egyptian probably at this point with his shaved head. He's got his clothes on now. And notice where he gives credit. In verse 16. This would be tempting for me to take the credit for something like this. He says, it is not I. God will give the Pharaoh a favorable answer. God's going to do this. It's not about me. If I had been in prison, I'd be ready to make some friends with the Pharaoh. I'd be ready. But he doesn't. he gives God the answer. He gives God the credit there. Speaks something about his character and not taking all the credit himself. So, he says, verse 24, but when I told it to the magicians, there was no one who could explain it to me. Sometimes our knowledge fails. The best research, the best whatever we have, it's going to fail. It does not provide the answers that we want. And it's not a bad idea, especially in those times, to seek the Lord's counsel, just as the Pharaoh is doing. And it's interesting that the Pharaoh recognizes this in some way. He's not the person that you would think that would recognize God's action, the true God's action in something, but he does. It's interesting to me that he says in verse 28, God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. And then plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. So God has decided, he says in verse 32, that the thing is fixed by God and God will bring it about shortly. All kinds of theological troubles come out of this for me. God creating this famine. This is something he's decided is going to happen. And there is a purpose for it. There's going to be a lot of absolutely miserable people. Kind of, to me, gets into that whole problem of evil. But we're going to leave that aside because we only have a few minutes. And I'm perfectly happy to do that. Let's go on. And we find out God is a big fan of big government. We find that out. Sorry. Wrong crowd. But the plan is that God has, right, is that the government's going to get all of the food together, and then people can buy it from them, and it be distributed fairly amongst the Egyptian people. So there's my communist spiel for the day. That's not mine. That's the Lord's. Sorry. Joke. That's a joke.
The right person in charge.
The right person in charge, Greg says. It does very much matter who's in charge. Very much. Let's move on to verse 37. Notice that God notices that the Spirit of God is with, or Pharaoh notices the Spirit of God is with Joseph. Again, that is not something I would automatically assume. But he's the one who gets it. And he makes the obvious choice. Joseph, you're the guy to handle this. He gives, in appreciation, he gives an Egyptian priestess to Joseph to get married. And I think it's really interesting that there's nothing negative said about this fact at all. That this pagan priestess for the god of On was given to Joseph, this man of God, and like they have their children. He says, he names his first child Manasseh, right? For God has made me forget about all my hardship in my father's house. And his second child he named Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my misfortunes. I'm going to ask the question, have you really forgotten all the troubles that you've had in your previous life if you're naming your child, I'm so glad I've forgotten all the previous troubles in my life? I kind of think he's probably still dealing with this, and that's how trauma works, right? You don't really just put it away. It doesn't really go away. It's always there with you. But he's trying. You see this, I think, a bit of the human side of him. He's trying to get past it. He's like, look how happy I should be. All my troubles I'm fruitful in this new place. I should be happy, but I don't think he is. I don't think he's really gotten past the fact. So the plan works. The famine happens. The plan works. And that's going to precipitate the need for his brothers to come in and do what they do here. Absolutely fascinating chapter for me, and we will not have time to do it. And I hate that. Anybody have any thoughts that they just want to share about chapter 42? I'll just do that. Yes, Sarah.
I think it's just like riddled with overtones of Jesus. From the dreams, like the vines, the 3 days, even the language. Points to, I don't know, just, I think it's all pointing to Jesus. There's
Yeah.
so many different, even the placement on the throne, you shall rule over my house and all my people. Anyway.
Distributing bread. Jesus did a bit of that, right? More than a bit. Yeah. Good point. It's always good to end a class with a reference to Jesus. That's good. Let's pray. Merciful God, thank you for being with us even in times when it is hard and we are perhaps innocent of the crimes accused of. And dear Father, it is wonderful that we can depend on you to be with us steadfastly, even as our fellow humans fail. And Lord, we thank you for turning misery into jubilation, for salvation, coming out of hardships and troubles. And dear Lord, we ask that as we go through this week, that our minds and our eyes be open to it. Dear Father, we hear your voice, whether it be in dreams or whether it be in circumstances, that you will help us to be aware of your movements and your presence. And Lord, help us always to love you and to seek to not sin against you. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.